Okay, folks, I guess we're ready to start. All of those technical folks who are behind us and making us able to talk to you have been satisfied and we're ready to go. So thank you, really, seriously. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Dennis Becker, and you'll be joined in just a moment by my colleague, Robin
Well, I'm
Galinsky.
here.
And she's here. And we're going to be talking about our favorite topic, manipulation. And today we have a particular aspect of manipulation that we want to talk about with you. And I'm going to ask Robin to share. Robin, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll jump into it.
Well, okay, Dennis. Well, I didn't say it was your fault, but I am going to blame you.
I hear that. I've heard that before.
That is the
What's the
topic.
topic? Right.
That's the topic. Yes. It's all about blame, which we've talked about before, but blame is pretty infinite. And what inspired me to want to go deeper on this today were was an experience with customer service representative that I had with the utility company.
Hmm.
And just in general, thinking more about the this is really a slippery slope of where we become compliant very quickly, because the blame piece, as we know, you and I know, can sneak up in tone. It can be quite subtle, quite nuanced. And the way you accept blame, you could do it verbally or non-verbally. And as soon as you accept, when I say accept blame, I'm specifically talking about accepting blame for something that wasn't your fault, that wasn't your responsibility, that you maybe even didn't even know about. So
Hmm.
the manipulator typically will condition you to accept blame for many, many, many things, because they slowly start to they want you. They don't take any responsibility for anything, so they
Mm-hmm.
need you to do that. Take
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for everything. Okay, so this is an aspect of the crazy making.
Hmm.
Let me pause there, lest I speak too long.
Yeah, well, I've heard before. I didn't say it was your fault, but I want to blame you. I heard that before.
Well, who
So,
doesn't love the
yeah,
blame?
we mean it with love. I know for sure.
I mean, everybody loves the blame flies around like crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
To what extent do you feel that blame is a standalone kind of a tactic, or to what extent is it blended in with other tactics that a manipulator might use?
I don't necessarily want to focus on that. I think like you just answered the question by with the question you asked. It's both. It's
Mhm,
a standalone and it's blended in. It's both.
mhm, mhm.
So let's talk about go ahead. What do you want to say about that?
Well, because the reason I ask that question is because uh, blame is such a strong word, and it's taken so often in one of two ways. Either like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or "What are you talking about? I'm not," one of two ways. And frankly, a manipulator almost doesn't care which way, as long as he or she gets an emotional reaction out of you by blaming you for something maybe you don't even know about, but you get blamed by it.
Um, yeah, so this one's a little different in that I don't think it's so much about the emotional reaction. It's more about the acceptance.
Mm,
So it's not so much focused on, hey, her feathers ruffled. It's
yeah.
more about, hey, she's apologizing. This
Hmm.
is great. That
Yeah.
means she's taking it in, she's internalizing it. And this is where you start to self-inflict. So let me go back to my example of the utility company in New York, woman I had on the phone. So I would send 4 bills for an investment property that were not ours, but they were addressed as though they were ours. So it was a little confusing. Anyway, whatever. Upsetting though, right? To find
Mm,
because they were in collections. But the address, the actual name was only partially right and partially wrong. So it was a little confusing. Well, you know how much fun this is, right? You sit on hold, you get transferred, then they disconnected me. Then I got back
oh,
into the queue,
oh,
got on. So I wasn't happy.
oh,
It's my
yeah,
least happy thing to do.
yeah.
Uh, so I said to her, now, none of this is your fault or in your control, but I am extremely unhappy about it.
Mhm.
My goodness, she just started saying, "I'm so, so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I said, "Whoa." And I started becoming more concerned about her than the bill. I said,
Mhm.
Mary or whatever her name was, I said, "You don't have to apologize for this because you didn't do it." And I know customer service, they do apologize on behalf, but I'm wondering, then it got me to thinking because she just couldn't stop saying she was sorry. And I thought, I kind of want to pull this woman out of her world and say, you need to call me on the side and we need to talk because if you're doing this with me,
Mhm.
I can only imagine how much you're doing this in real life. And
Mhm.
this brings me to this whole thing with females are we're very aware of the fact that we're too quick to say I'm sorry, and we often say we're sorry for things we don't do. So I wanted to bring the awareness to our listeners to being very, very careful with their language.
Mhm.
Those words, I'm sorry, should rarely be said. They shouldn't be
Mm.
coming out of your mouth like okay or whatever word we say all the time.
Mhm.
It should be rare and it should have some pre-qualifications. It should genuinely be something that was your responsibility within your control and that you failed at. That's the only time you should say, I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me stop you right there for a second because most companies that have service workers who have to be in contact with their customers or their clients, in fact, many people, whether you're in a company or not, will say, I'm sorry in response to something else that the other person is having difficulty with, going through,
I don't
having a
want to
bad
get,
time.
yeah, I know you
Right?
and I train customer service. I don't want to get caught up on the customer service side of this. You,
I'm making the point that in life, people do this. They say it all the time. I'm sorry. And sometimes, let me understand. I was just going to project something, but I'll ask you first. You said you should never say I'm sorry
unless,
unless, go ahead. That's the part I want you to repeat.
unless it's in your control, it was your responsibility and you failed.
Mhm. So if someone says something to you that they think was your responsibility in your control, and you say, I'm sorry, are you suggesting that you should not say, I'm sorry,
Correct.
if it was not in your control and it was
Correct.
not your responsibility? So you're saying, don't say, I'm sorry then. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. No, let me just dabble because you opened up that customer service portal. There's many other things she could have said. She could have said, um, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I'm sorry you had that experience. So she didn't say that. She just kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That
Okay.
so okay, she
Okay.
didn't say that it's unfortunate that you experienced that. Let me see what I can do to turn it around.
Okay.
Okay, so let me see what's in my control to change this.
Hmm.
That's different. And you and I know, Dennis, and everybody knows this, but it cannot be said enough, is that language has so much power because
Hmm.
when you're speaking, you're invoking something out of the ether. You're creating something. What is the United States?
Hmm.
It was invoked out of
Yeah.
the ether. The Declaration of Independence, it was
Yeah.
declared.
Yeah.
That's how we were born into a nation.
Hmm.
So, what is the first thing we do when a baby's born? We name them. So we know that language it's more than just language. It's energy. It has a vibration.
Hmm.
It's so many things. And I know I won't go into too much woo woo, but these are things that we all know. And we feel the vibration of language. They've even measured the vibration of words, and they have very different vibrations, whether
So,
when negative or positive. So,
so let's put this in the world of manipulation now. And tell me why a person should not say, I'm sorry, when whatever the blame or the accusation was coming to them came from someone that they believe is a manipulator. Why should you not say, I'm sorry there?
well, I'm stretching this beyond the manipulator. I'm stretching this to say you should never say you're sorry if it wasn't in your control. It wasn't your responsibility, and you did not make a mistake.
So,
Okay. So if I let the door
okay.
slam in your face, Dennis, on the way out of the grocery store, that was in my control and it was a mistake.
Mhm.
And I was
Mhm.
responsible. I should be responsible for making sure a swinging door doesn't hit somebody behind me.
Mhm.
Okay. So in that instance, it slams you in the face. I'm going to say, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
But I'm stretching it to you should never say you're sorry unless those three things are in place. And the reason is because you are giving up. You're doing so many terrible things when you do this. When you say you're sorry for things that were not in your control and weren't your fault, you are you're giving up your own personal power. You're neuro linguistically programming yourself to think that things are your fault that are not your fault. And you end up feeling bad right after you say it because you're taking responsibility for something. Then you beat yourself up for something that wasn't within your control
Mhm.
because you then you start going down this slippery slope where you say, well, why didn't I think that through? Or why didn't I? And you start to you start to abuse yourself. This is
Mhm.
where the internalization, the compliance happens because you start saying, oh my gosh, I have to do better. Let me
Yeah,
just
but
pause.
I see here, let me give you let me
Blame is so complicated.
I wanna diverge for just a second here because sometimes when people say, "I'm sorry," and I wanna put a little bit more with that, and you tell me how you react to this. "I'm sorry that you feel that way," or "I'm sorry that that happened to you." When you add something like that, how does it change in your perception? How does that change the value of "I'm sorry"? What's
Okay.
wrong with saying it that way?
I'm gonna say no one should ever say, "I'm sorry that you feel that way," because
Why not?
that sentence sounds extremely manipulative.
What are you
It
talking
sounds
about? Somebody
okay,
who's sorry about something that happened, and
so
they're sorry that they lost they're sorry that their
sorry is
cat
not the
got hit
same
by a
word.
car, and you said, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way."
No, that's not right.
Why not?
I'm sorry that you had that experience
Yeah,
or maybe that, but I'm
yeah,
sorry that you feel that okay, so here's the reason why that ruffles my feathers is with my manipulator, I'd often get into an argument where I'm trying to get my manipulator to take responsibility
yeah,
for the way they have treated me.
yes.
And I'm sorry that you feel that way is not an apology. It's not a real apology. It's skirting it. It's saying, yeah, well, tone is everything, right? But I'm sorry that you feel that way almost has an implication embedded in it that you're not right for feeling that way.
But how do you express empathy for someone who's had a tragedy of some sort, and you want to express empathy for the fact that they're experiencing this empathy?
By expressing empathy.
Well, what's wrong with saying, "I'm sorry.
What
I'm
is
sorry you
empathy?
feel that way. I'm
No,
sorry that happened to you."
no, what is empathy? And I love these spirited discussions. Can I just say I just love them. Um, no, empathy as I put myself in your shoes and I say, it must feel very disappointing to have your son talk to you with a disrespectful tone.
Mhm.
So I'm putting myself in your shoes and I'm naming a specific
Okay. What
that's empathy.
does it help you if I say, "I feel sorry that your son talked to you that way. I feel
No,
sorry." What's wrong
no.
with that?
Okay. That's patronizing.
Oh my
So
goodness.
maybe our listeners can chime in on this, but that feels very I feel sorry for you is pity. Nobody wants to be pitied.
I didn't say feel sorry
Nobody
for you. I feel sorry that your son talked to you that way.
no,
I'm
because
not
you're not
apologizing.
responsible. You're not responsible for it. It's not within your
No.
control. Why do you
R
feel sorry for it? I think you're missing like the naming of the emotion. It's not sorry unless you want to give somebody pity, but I can tell you I don't recommend it for building relationships. When you give somebody pity, it elevates you and de diminishes somebody else. "Oh, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry that you I'm sorry. No, 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 no.
Hmm. I'm
I
sorry you feel that way. You're objecting to the words "I'm sorry." Is that correct? That's the only thing that's objectionable to you, is that it sounds like I'm taking responsibility for something I had no control over anyway. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that you're having this experience. What's wrong with saying that?
I
I am
just said
sorry
what
that you're
was
feeling
wrong.
that way.
Sorry isn't the right word.
What's the right word? How would you express something
It
that
makes me
shows empathy?
it makes me sad to see you going through this.
Okay.
Talk
Yeah.
about yourself, but I'm sorry. I don't know how to describe it any differently than I've described it. Um, it really needs to have the 3 things we just talked about. Was that in your control? No. Was it your responsibility? No. Did you do something wrong? No. So therefore, why are you sorry?
Mhm. So relate this to a manipulator. How a manipulator might use this or might abuse this whole concept of saying "I'm sorry." Something you should not say or should say with a
Okay, so
manipulator. What do you think?
the thing that goes hand in hand is the sorry and the blame, right?
Yeah.
Blame.
Right.
So the blame, now we go back to the manipulator will blame subtly or imply. Let's just say imply that it's your fault, which is blame, but
Hmm.
it's not always overt. It's rarely overt.
Yeah.
It
Right.
comes
Right.
out it comes out in a tone.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of a client who her the way she moves around the world is she perceives that she's being blamed all the time. So
Hmm.
she's conditioned. So when we get really bad down this rabbit hole, when we've been around people who blamed us for everything, I remember my mother when we were kids being on the second floor, dropping something on the floor and it breaking, and her screaming at us and blaming us. We were on the first floor, she was on the second floor. And I remember as a kid going, "What?" And she's like, because we were making too much noise and she made her loss, whatever it was. I mean, it's always, it's just, it got to the point of ridiculousness where
Yeah.
she was always going. So, okay. So if you're conditioned that way, then
Yeah.
you grow up thinking everything's your responsibility. Other people's
Yeah.
emotions, other people's
Yeah.
experiences are your responsibility as
Hmm.
an adult.
Hmm.
As an adult, you're still taking it on. Took me a while to sort this out. I had a friend who told me that I was a fantastic stress absorber. That's what she loved it. I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You just take it all on so I don't have to." And
Yeah.
I said, "Whoa, what? What do I do?" Okay,
Yeah.
so I have a client who feels blamed even when so she was telling me about an experience of which she had something that she was assigned to do, and she did everything that she was hear me was within her control,
Hmm.
was her
Okay.
responsibility,
Yep.
and it didn't work. And she brought the
Her
result.
solution didn't work. You're talking about.
Her efforts did
Yeah.
not result in what they wanted,
Yeah.
but she did her part. But
Hmm.
not everything was in her control, right?
Hmm.
The part that was within her control that she was responsible for, she executed.
Hmm.
And then it didn't work because a lot of us who are at higher levels in organizations, right? We're doing the big boy, big girl stuff that doesn't always work out. So she brought the results to her boss, and her boss's reaction was disappointment, very disappointed because it was a big deal what they needed to get done.
Hmm.
Well, that's normal human behavior. She internalized it immediately as judgment, as
Uh,
she was a failure,
uh-huh.
as the boss was disappointed in her.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a mindset, and it's a
Yeah.
mindset that you get
Yeah.
over time through
Hmm.
conditioning. And I had
Correct.
to point out to her that it's normal for her boss to be disappointed, but she does not need to internalize that. She can say, "I understand how you feel. I'm disappointed as well." And this was
Mhm.
like an epiphany for her because she
Mhm.
doesn't think that way. She immediately starts what's the word? Flagellate. She starts, what do the Catholics do when they hit themselves in the back until they bleed?
Mhm. Mhm.
She immediately starts doing that.
Mhm.
Well, when you indicate that your willingness to do that, people pick up on this, by the way. So
Mhm.
even all people are manipulative, right? We all manipulate one way or another, but then we talk a lot about the manipulator. They don't know how to not manipulate.
Yeah.
But every office, every department, every family, when you realize somebody's willing to be the scapegoat, heck yeah, let's pile
Mhm.
on, right?
Mhm.
Let them be the scapegoat because now I don't have to take responsibility. I can just blame that other person. By
Mhm.
the way, I was at a campground once and this guy was yelling at his wife. It was hilarious. He said, "You're just trying to turn me into an scapegoat."
Scapegoat.
Well, no, it's called there's no E at the front of it. It's not an
No, it's a
scapegoat. It's
different issue.
a letter.
So
Right.
what can you
Gotta throw
say? What should you told us about what you think you should not say. What could you say in a situation like you described? What is the more acceptable, appropriate, protective way to respond to something like that without saying I'm
so
sorry? What else can you say?
look, take a moment and think, because the blame arrows can fly like
Oh yeah,
fast and furious, right?
of
So
course.
was this my fault? Let's just say you know for a fact that it wasn't. You
Okay.
say, "It sounds like you're trying to blame me. I
Mhm.
refuse to accept any blame."
Mhm.
Or you can just say, "I refuse to accept any blame for this." You want to say a short, succinct sentence, a declaration, if you will, with conviction. So hear the delivery. You need eye contact, you need to be succinct, and then you need to cut the conversation off because they're going to keep going at it different angles. Oh,
Mhm.
you're not going to accept any blame? Well, who's the person who did it? Da, 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 and
Yeah,
who's
yeah,
the person
yeah,
who did it? Da, 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 and
yeah,
whatever and they'll
right.
start being more and more irrational.
Yeah. So the word refuse is pretty strong. You're suggesting
Yes.
they actually use the word refuse. I refuse to accept blah blah blah. Correct?
That
Any other
statement
word you could use?
that statement is almost perfect because
Yeah.
that statement is power.
Mhm.
If you're an adult and you're listening to this, honestly, I'm gonna say anybody over 13. I started doing this stuff when I was 13. If you're a kid who's listening to this and you're, over 13, you start having rights, um, ab as you grow up. Certainly as an adult, you have a right to decide how you're going to feel and what you're going to be responsible for and what you're going to own up to and what you're not going to go. That's your choice. That's your
Mhm.
choice. And
Mhm.
if you want to accept no responsibility for anything ever, that's your choice. Not going to be a good life, but if you
Mhm.
want to live that way, you can live that way.
Mhm.
So the declaration, I refuse to accept blame for this. And
Mhm.
this part you can replace with specificity
Mhm.
if you like. That's the only thing I would change.
Mhm. Mhm.
But those are some people out there who are much more acquiescent, if you will, people pleasers. Please listen to me, people pleasers. You you want to people please, all you're doing is creating contempt. So if you really want people to like you, you're not going to do it by accepting blame for things that aren't your responsibility because they will not respect you and eventually they will not like you. They will have contempt for you.
All right, let me jump in with people pleaser because there are times, particularly at work, but also in a personal relationship, a private relationship, where you certainly don't want to, you can't afford to make a bad relationship out of
Yeah,
this
let's
interaction. You
let's
don't
talk
want to do
about
that.
that. Yeah, that's
So
a good
I'm saying that the words "I refuse to" that is very already confrontational. Is there a softer way to say "I refuse to" other than saying "I refuse"? Yeah, see, it's hard. It's hard for you because that's the way you talk. You
I,
are that way. You're feisty.
I
But for
am
our
feisty.
listeners who are not that feisty, I'm
Right.
suggesting that there would be another way to say "I'm sorry." Even just the
Well,
word refuse, just the word refuse. You can say,
okay.
I'm not able to respond to this because I'm not responsible for this, or I was not responsible for this, or
Yeah, I was just gonna say
I
you should chime in with that because I I have a hard time with that part because,
yes,
yeah,
you
so
do.
well, I do because, I've been to battle, okay? So you're like asking somebody who's been on the front lines of a war to come back and make nice, you know? So yeah, it's not so easy.
Yeah, but the
All right,
idea for us is to give our listeners who have
you're here. You're
have
the
have a
resource
various
example.
have various levels of manipulation in their life.
That's
And
right.
perhaps one of the things that they don't want to do is to ruin the relationship. It might be a parent, a friend, or whatever. They don't want to ruin the relationship. They just want to
Oh,
make it
okay.
known. They
Stop
just
right
want to make it known that they're
Okay.
not going to accept this kind of behavior. That's
Okay.
all.
The ruining of the relationship is a whole nother podcast. So that mindset, if you're going to keep a relationship that's dysfunctional and abusive at any cost, at
No, not
accepting,
at any cost. I didn't
okay,
say at any
or
cost.
no, you didn't. But
I'm
if you're
asking for a change of language, of vocabulary to use because the word refuse is almost an any cost word. That's going to
I
that's
really
going
like
to
it.
create in the other person a feeling of offensiveness or defensiveness or accusation that they
I
said
don't,
something to you.
I don't care.
Oh, you don't care. Oh boy.
I have a right to refuse things.
Yeah.
I have an obligation to myself to not hurt myself, harm myself. And if I'm going to accept blame for something that's not my fault or not my responsibility, then I'm harming myself. So, okay, but I hear you on the nuanced language.
Yeah.
I do hear you.
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point at work, professionally, with a
Yeah.
senior person. Right. You need to say, um,
Hey, John, that's just not accurate. What you just said to me, Tom, is not accurate. That's not saying I refuse. It's saying it's not
okay,
accurate, or
so that's logos.
it's a different feeling. It doesn't
That's
give
what
as much
logos
of an
mean.
emotional reaction to the other person. Oh, well, what are you so sensitive about? I'm not blaming you to come back with, oh, I'm not blaming you. I'm saying you have to refuse
You
me.
know,
I'm
they
not,
were blaming you with their tone or their nuance, their maybe passive
well,
aggressive.
you certainly took it that way. You took it that way, but manipulators are going to do what? They're going to back off and say, "Oh, no, no, don't be so sensitive. I'm
Well,
not
they always have
blaming you,
positive.
even though they were blaming you. They're going to say, oh, I'm not blaming you. You don't have to get like that about it."
Okay, so that's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good point. So they oftentimes will imply blame with their tone or less overtly, less directly, so that they can accuse you of being overly sensitive.
Oh, don't be so sensitive. That's the word. Don't be so sensitive. You don't have to refuse. You just have to let
Okay,
us
you're
know
right.
that there was a part of this that you were not in charge with. But you don't have to say, but he's already put the blame out there, or she has already
Yeah.
put it out there.
Yes. So you're right. We do need and also a way. Here's what's important about this. It's very important that the word accept, that you don't accept the blame for
Yeah.
something that is not yours.
Okay.
So you could go Dennis's route and say, I disagree with I disagree with your assessment. I disagree with your narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You
don't
could.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something though, that does not leave it as though you're internalizing this blame.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. You are really making a semantic argument here that the words, particularly the word refuse, has a connotation for others, but your concern is that when you say that word, you are internally accepting a
Yes,
certain amount of blame, which you don't deserve, wasn't you, all of that. But
you're
by
not
using that
accepting.
word, so I'm suggesting, I agree with you, Robin. I agree that that's an important
It's a
semantic issue.
powerful, it's
What we need
power.
another word though. So you don't
I
just
can't
walk away.
accept blame for this. Or the opposite, a different statement. This was not in my control,
There you go.
nor was it my responsibility.
There you go. There you go. That's what
But
I'm talking about.
short, it has to end there. The more
Okay.
you talk, and Dennis, we both know this, the more I start to explain. So listen to the difference. This was not in my control, nor was it my responsibility. Period. I say nothing after
That's
that.
fine. That's
Now,
fine.
but what most people want to do is say, well, this was not in my control, nor was it my responsibility because, it was supposed to go to Bob and Bob was assigned the task. And last time Bob was assigned the task, I did help him out and I did,
Mhm.
did his slides for him and I helped him a
Yeah.
lot. And then Bob shone like a star. And then, but that's not my job. That's Bob's job. And I was nice enough
Okay,
to help
that's a
him out.
bit much. Yes, they do. People do tend
People
to do
do
that.
that.
They go on and on. I
And
agree with you.
now it looks like you are guilty.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah. Short and sweet. That's the whole,
Yeah.
and that's the way, we've said that many times about many of the tactics and the technique that you use when you're responding or reacting to the tactic. One of the techniques is short and sweet. Respond if you have to, and if you do, it's
It's
short
not
and
that
sweet.
sweet,
Stop talking.
but
Yeah, I agree with you.
my statements aren't sweet. They're just short.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are short and sweet, brought to you every week by by the topic of manipulation,
No,
which has brought us
mine
together.
are short, yours are sweet, and then we try
That's
to
what I mean. Okay, I'll
yeah,
take that part. All
yeah.
right, we do
We
have to move
will.
along. So, thank you very much for that. The old clock on the wall tells us that it's time for us to move along. So, this has been an interesting kind of a conversation
We're
for
not
us to
done with
have.
this topic.
And we hope that those of you who are listening have benefited by all of this, and you may benefit in different ways. Keep writing to us, keep dropping us emails and letting us know because we really appreciate it when you do that. And we're going to be having more guests to come on the show with us in the near future. So stay tuned.
Yes.
We're so glad that you're with us today. And remember that short and sweet is the way to do it. Don't take the blame. Don't take the hook. Don't take the bait to jump in right away. And don't blame yourself. Don't accept something and don't use language that internally causes you to accept something that you didn't do. You were not responsible for. This is a message from Robin today. So thank you for being with us. And as you've learned, she is Robin Golinsky, and I'm Dr. Dennis Becker. Thanks again for being with us. Bye for now.